All right, fastest 15 minutes on the internet, fastest 15 minutes in social media. My name is Judson Powell. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. All right. Okay, so now I want to continue talking about this whole George Floyd situation. And basically, I want to talk about racism and the origins and the root causes of it, and also the spiritual causes and some of the things that are going on and why we are at this point. All right. So the I want to go back to a quote that I saw floating around, and it said, "We are very lucky that black people just want equality and they don't want revenge." All right. And I mean, and don't get me wrong, there are some people out on the street that do want revenge. Don't think that everybody out there just wants equality, because that's not 100% true. And it's not even 100% true that that equality or whatever will quell the argument. Here's the thing. All right. When I was in law school, I wrote a paper, and the paper that I wrote, basically it talked about how integration was like the worst thing that ever happened, and that we should have kept on the path of separate but equal. And and so one of my professors was very upset about that paper, and in fact refused to grade it. And I almost didn't graduate from law school because of it. And I just thought about it, and I kept thinking about it. I've been thinking about this stuff for years. And I mean, that was like back in 2003 when I wrote that paper. And my whole thing is that anytime that we just wanted to be equal, or we just wanted equality, we were always met with opposition. And even when we wanted to be separate, we were like, okay, we'll be separate from you. But then you have things like Black Wall Street, or syphilis experiments, and all different types of things. And even with this coronavirus thing, I see the hints of all of that coming up again. It's like, you wanted to, basically the World Health Organization and Bill Gates and, well, not the World Health Organization, but the Centers for Disease Control, Bill Gates and a few other people, they wanted to test vaccines on Africans. And Africa basically had the lowest infection rate of any continent. There were hardly any infections in Africa. So why are you trying to vaccinate Africans? And it's always been that way. And so I remember when I was reading up, and I was like trying to find out why does racism exist? Why? Because and it goes back to the fact that our ancestors civilized the world, but we are not given credit for it. And a lot of that has taken on a life of its own. It has manifested into us believing that we're less than what we are. And I think that has been perpetuated throughout society and basically throughout centuries. I mean, we're talking about, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. And I believe that, I remember reading about Alexander the Great. And when Alexander the Great went to Kemet, which is Egypt, went to Kemet, and he wanted to become part of the priests, the priests there in Kemet, and they refused him. And so I know that is one of the catalysts for racism, because he didn't want to take no for an answer. And the reason why, and it's in the papyrus, and these things have been altered and they've been changed, and people have tried to rewrite the stories and all that kind of stuff. But the bottom line was, the Kemetic priest told him no, he could not be a Kemetic priest. Why? Because he wasn't human. And so that is one of the catalysts to racism, because when he found out, it was like, well, you can't be a Kemetic priest. And so that papyrus that's floating around, that they actually tried to change the colors on it so that a Caucasian would be included in that entire thing. That's why I preach about this all the time, because people have to realize what the origin is and why at some of, because even black people, they go, well, how come, why are we so, hated? And why do people do others? Well, one of the reasons why was that rejection right there. And you know that it must have occurred because it's documented. And those papyrus and the hieroglyphs and everything are documented. And basically, as I've talked about before, it was said that there were only 4 races of human. Hue meaning color, and those were yellow people, red people, brown people, and black people. And everybody else, all the Caucasians, were considered not human. And one reason why they came to that conclusion was because at the point that the Caucasian basically came into any type of power, they were civilized by the black race, the Moors. And once again, Moors, not talking about anything religious, not talking about any sex or anything like that. What we're talking about is when they refer to a person as a Moor, they were just referring to them as a black African from Al-Kebulon, the land of black people. And so they found these Caucasians because of what? Caucasian comes from what? Caucasus Mountains, Neanderthals, all of that, and they were uncivilized. So we get into this whole thing about, okay, well, we created you, and then once again go to the thing with Elijah Muhammad. And and I, once again, not talking about religion, not talking about Islam or being a Muslim or anything like that, but talking about from the standpoint of the reason why when the Caucasians took power, they took power, and when they wrote the Bible and the Quran, okay, Hagia Sophia in Turkey, all right, they made the Moors rewrite the Bible. Or they made, which was the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, etc. And they took the information that was taken from the hieroglyphs that the Kemetic priests had taken out of Kemet, so that they could try to protect the real knowledge and science, because it wasn't a religion, it was scientific. And so that's where, and so then as you come up through history, we've been indoctrinated into so many different things, so many different, just talking right here, I've already mentioned a couple of religions, but there was no religion. There was only universal law, which is what our ancestors discovered. There was no God, there was only nature. There was nobody who was a supreme being over anybody. So supremacy came about. And once again, I always tell people, black supremacy is no better than white supremacy, is no better than brown supremacy, is no better than red supremacy. No one is supreme. And that's the problem that everybody fails to realize. Nobody, even when people go around talking about black power is wrong. White power is wrong. Green power is wrong. A lot of times it's green power that rules stuff, money. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, and the scientific fact of spirituality is that everything must be related with balance. So if anything is superior, then everything else, everything is on the same. That's why I always talk about the law of polarity. Just like 100 degrees is on the thermometer, 100 degrees Fahrenheit is on the thermometer, but then again, so is 10 degrees on the thermometer, but it's just different degrees. but it's all the same. It's all the same thing. It's either the presence or the absence of heat or cold. And so, and then you have like the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. It's all, and it's based upon, even yin and yang, up and down, in and out, back and forth, whatever. There's an opposite to everything. And it doesn't, but what we have done spiritually is we have created a paradigm which states that things are either, that everything is, if you do something, it's a sin, or if you do this, or if you do that, and we place labels upon them all. Whereas universal laws don't affect anybody any differently. Once again, I'll use gravity. Gravity affects everybody the same way. If I jump up in the air, standing right here in Phoenix, Arizona, guess what? I'm going to go back down to the ground. If a white man stands right where I'm standing and he jumps up in the air, he's going to go right back down to the ground. And the same is true for everybody. But the notion that anybody is better than anybody else is what is the prerequisite for all racism. And then the fact that I can do evil, or I can harm you, or I can manifest things against you, and people walk around thinking, certain things are holier than thou, but there is nothing that is holier than thou. So, for example, that's why I tell black people all the time, come out of religion. Religion is the worst thing that ever happened to us. When we left Africa and they gave us Jesus, that destroyed us, that killed us. Because instead of understanding that the universal law of action would take us to wherever we wanted to go, right? Or that why do you think the government spent billions of dollars to try to keep us from being able to open our pineal glands, to be able to open your third eye? Because they knew that, hey, once we opened our third eye and we had vision, we had actual vision, and we could speak directly to the Most High, and that we could access the Akashic records and things like that. They knew about this stuff, and throughout time and throughout history, they have tried to do everything they could to dumb us down. There's a book out. It's called Black People Invented Everything. And that's what they did. So they just allowed us to invent and to create and to mastermind everything, and then they stole it all. But because we are not inherently, because we are the children of the Most High, because we're not inherently evil, because we're not inherent, it's not in our nature. Once again, we studied the nature of everything that was in the earth. And it's not our nature to be vengeful. It's not in our nature to be hateful. It's not in our nature not to forgive. It's not in our nature. It's just not there. We don't have that in us. So people always say, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Because you can't, whatever is just like a frog is created to hop. That's in his nature. So all of the things that we're trying to do, or the things that we're trying to, facilitate or manifest, all of it is not within our nature. But in the nature of the Caucasian, their nature is like that. And so that's how come, and then basically what they did was they taught us, after they were in control, they taught us parts of their nature. All of that stuff, because I laugh at everyone. People say, well, black people did this, this, and this. Yes, they did. But where was the original part come from? Just like, and I know people get mad. You talk about homosexuality or stuff like that. There was no homosexuality in Kemet or in Kush or in Nubia or in Ethiopia. That did not exist. In fact, it doesn't really even exist in Africa today. Same thing with divorce and things like that. We didn't have that. There are countries in Africa right now that literally have less than 1% divorce rate. There was no, domestic violence. All of these things that went to the opposite in the law of polarity. All of these things that went to the opposite end of the scale because they weren't like us. And some people call them reptilians or whatever have you, and all this kind of stuff. But it's true. We are inherently different, but we are also inherently equal. It's just that one thing is different from, that one is up and one is down. And so in order to try to maintain balance, and then you have to think about all of the things that, because technically, why are you mad at us? Just like even look at my skin, look at my complexion. My complexion is like this because people raped my ancestors. And now, it's true. I mean, you can't deny it. The same thing is, if you look at indigenous people, there are indigenous people that came from Alkebulan that ended up all over the world because we were the original ones that created ships. We were the original ones that created, travel across the earth and all of that. So I get the whole thing about, when people talk about how there were already Africans in what we call America. There were already Africans, the Aztecs, the Mayans, what we call Eskimos, in the Bering Straits, all over the world. And the symbolizations of our civilization, the symbols of our civilizations are pretty much wherever you go, even underwater. Our civilizations literally, but then they decided they wanted, we helped them, and then they decided they wanted to wipe us out. And it's even true here, in Turtle Island, what we now call America. It was called Turtle Island because of the nature of the place, not because of, some man wanted to have glory. The same thing with Africa. These are Italian names. So that's why I always tell you, when you start reading stuff, and the first thing, no matter what you do, you're gonna get an analysis based on what? Or Greek and Roman mythology. And that's what it is. It's a myth. It was created because they didn't have a civilization. The first writing came from Alkebulan. The first alphabet, the first ways to speak, languages, all of that, it all came from us. And then throughout the years, they basically, and then they try to confuse us. And that's why I tell people all the time about the timeline with Heru. Because and then when they created the United States, they used our knowledge, our science, and our wisdom, and got us to think that everything that we did was evil, or somehow we didn't deserve it, and that we had to wait for somebody from the sky to give it to us. And that was never the truth. That was never the truth. So the first thing that has to be done in order for there to be any type of reconciliation is that you have to give credit where credit is due. The automobile. The first automobile was invented by an African. The first cell phone. The first, the fact that vibration, the law of vibration was discovered by Africans in Alkebulan. That's where it came from. How do you think you get, even with this 5G technology and all that kind of stuff? What is that? Radio waves, television waves, sound, music, art, color, everything. Everything. I mean, seriously, everything. That's why, and then I tell people, go back, look at all the inventions. The lawn, didn't I mean just simple stuff, the lawnmower, the traffic light, or go into medicine. Cell biology, blood transfusions. And then but yet and still, then we're told, oh well, you're not smart enough to be a doctor. Law. The entire country was set up by John Hanson, a Moor, a black man, and the entire Masonic layout of Washington D.C. by Benjamin Banneker, a Moor. They didn't do none of this. They didn't create none of this. They wrote their stuff down and then destroyed all our stuff. But you got to admit it. You got to be honest with everybody. And then even when we tried to separate, Marcus Garvey tried to start a Back to Africa movement. I see people all the time. Well, why don't y'all go back to Africa? We tried. Well, why don't y'all get y'all own stuff? Yeah, we tried. It was called Black Wall Street. Why don't y'all do this? We did. It's never been because we couldn't or we were inept at anything. We always had the ability. We've always had the ability. But every time we try to do something, somebody tried to thwart us because you want us to serve you. That's what you want. You want us to serve you. You want us to discover everything and then serve you, and then you turn around and call us lazy and shiftless. I remember my mother told me. I remember I was in junior high school, and my mother was a science teacher. And my mother said to me, she said, you know, when I was your age, I was in class and they asked me what I wanted to be. And I said, I want to be a scientist. And the person told her, well, you might as well learn how to cook or work in somebody's kitchen because you'll never be a scientist. And I remember that like so vividly. You know, it's almost like she's right here with me right now telling me the story again. And she at that point, she told me, she said, you know what? She told me, you don't belong to me. You belong to the Most High, and you belong to the world. And she said, don't let anybody ever tell you what you can't do. And that's how black people have always been. We've never been, you know, we built the country. And what's the meme that's been going around? Black people have every right to burn down the country that they built for free. And that's what we did. We built this country for free. And now they've replaced us with Mexicans because that's the next. See, they always looking for a new slave. That's the thing. The powers that be, they always looking for a new slave. That's why they mad at China right now. Because at first, you know, using China, think about it. This is all propaganda, folks. Ain't got nothing to do with Chinese being bad people or nothing like that. Everybody is looking for a slave. They're looking for somebody who will work for free or damn near for free, so that they can stockpile money. White privilege is based on all of the money that they have stolen for 400 years. That's what white privilege is based on. Or how come all of them got good credit and all of us got bad credit? Or how come they can get credit even if they don't really have good credit? How come they can get a loan to fix up their house? If you ever been in most major cities, like the black side of town, the houses are exactly identical to on the white side of town, but the white side of town looks pristine and the black side of town looks toe up from the flow up. It's called redlining. Right? It's blatant, all out discrimination, and it's systemic. And when white guys get up there and talk about, who was that said that the other day? Talk about there is no systemic racism. Crazy. But until you're willing to admit it, This ain't gonna never change. It's not gonna ever change until there's a admission. You know, it's like when they discovered they for years they said that slaves didn't build the White House, and then George W. Bush found some documents, some wills, last wills and testaments, and some other documents with some insurance documents inside the White House about slaves that had gotten hurt while they were working on the White House. So yeah, let's not trip. Let's not mince words. Let's not be, stop. We tried. We have tried. And when we get to points like this, and see, the thing is, I don't want us to lose the moment. See, I don't want us to lose the moment, And everybody, and then you got these people, and they're donating all this money, but that you can't, what my daddy used to say, throwing good money after bad. The only way that we can change anything is, and that's the other thing, they've made us the ultimate consumer. They have made us the ultimate consumer. They have used envy and all of these kind of things in order to get us to buy stuff that we really don't need and that we never needed before. Do y'all realize that El Kebulan was like one of the greatest, the places there, it was one of the greatest civilizations in the world. And money was almost irrelevant. Nobody was starving. Nobody was homeless. It wasn't all this perversion and all this other crazy stuff. And then you use propaganda to make people think that this is the best place on earth. Well, if I wasn't literally a political prisoner here in the United States of America, I felt a whole lot better and a lot more comfortable when I was in Africa. I ain't never worried about nothing, and I felt so free. I didn't feel like I had anything hanging over my head. But you gotta be honest. This is a point where everybody has to be honest, especially white folks. You don't want to give up white privilege. You don't want to pay reparations, but you owe. In the words of my man on Boondocks, you gonna pay what you owe, one way or the other, and you reap what you sow. And you sown some bad seeds, man. And just like everybody was at, well, what would Martin Luther King do? You're nonviolent. Y'all push Martin Luther King upon black people so that we would be nonviolent. But I think now we changing our minds. I'm just saying, be honest. White privilege, white supremacy, white nationalism. White people were not here. There were already Africans here. There are already people from El Kebulan here. And y'all just came, killed them, and took over. My great-great-grandfather died as a result of smallpox. My grandfather's brother died as a result of lynching. And never hated y'all as much as y'all hate us. Anyway, fastest 15 minutes turned into the fastest 30 minutes. Don't let this moment go. Don't let this moment go. You got to be honest. There is no real supremacy. There's only lies that people tell. But there is no real supremacy. Pretty much everybody is equal unless you got a gun to my head. Fastest 15 minutes is up. I got a lot. Anyway, I love y'all. Stay safe out there. Keep your head on a swivel because there's all kinds of people out there doing all kinds of stuff. I love you.